Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 back again with some more lore, and today's video, boys and gals, we are back with our What People Get Wrong About X series. And today, we got a very meta one. I love that joke. But today, we're talking about the Iron Warriors, the 4th Legion, the unyielding 4th. So, strap on in, grab what you want, and let's talk about the Sons of Mr. Peter Turbo. The Iron Warriors are the 4th Legionnaires Astartes. They were originally known as the Corpse Grinders, but they were the premier anti-siege experts. If a fortress needed to get cracked, you get these fellas, and they were called the Corpse Grinders because they specialized in attrition-based warfare. Now when I say attrition-based warfare and elite super soldiers, you may look at me a little cross-eyed, but you need to understand, the shit that was back in 30k was wild. They had weapons that made power armor look like flak armor, hence why you needed super soldier-based attrition, and the Iron Warriors, well, they fit that bill to a T. They were one of the 2 specialist siege legions alongside the 7th Legion, that being the Imperial Fists. But whereas the Fists built fortifications, the Iron Warriors broke them, and they broke them well. Eventually, however, they would be reunited with their Primarch, Perturabo, and he would not be a good influence on them, from an emotional standpoint. From a practical standpoint, kinda. You see, the first thing that Perty did when he joined up with his sons was decimate them, because he thought their combat record was pretty shit, and executions will continue until morale improves. So Perturabo did not have much love for his sons. In fact, so much so that after his personal bodyguard died defending him, he thought that they were too shit at their job, and created robots to replace them. This led to the Iron Hands becoming incredibly bitter, most of them. A good chunk of them managed to stay loyal, because they really didn't care what Perturabo thought of them so long as they were serving the Emperor. The most famous being Barbius Chad Dantiok, who would eventually die in the service of the Ultramarines, and his remaining soldiers would go on to form the Silver Skulls chapter. Not confirmed, but very highly speculated. Ultimately, the Iron Warriors would end the heresy with their Pyrrhic victory over their eternal rivals, the Imperial Fists, via the Iron Cage, before the Legion would then splinter and then fuck off into the Eye of Terror. And given that we've had literally zero information about what Perturabo is doing and his whereabouts, they're going to stay like that for the foreseeable future. But now, what is it that people get wrong about the Iron Warriors? And the thing is, what people get wrong about them is that people think that they are evil. They are not evil. They're just kinda assholes. The Iron Warriors can be described as an iron lemon. Hard on the outside, very hard. And on the inside, sour as a motherfucker. But if you take that sourness and you treat it right, it can be used to make a deliciously sweet dessert. But that's only if you know how to do it right. And only if you can get through the metal outer shell, and only if you can stop them from killing you when they see you, which is kinda hard. You can consider this video a companion piece to my previous video I did, why the Iron Warriors are the best traitor legion. Best as in combat effectiveness, not in terms of aesthetic or anything like that, though their aesthetic is quite nice. The Iron Warriors were not always bitter pieces of shit. Perturabo made them that way. In fact, when they were the Corpse Grinders, while they had high attrition rates, they treated their human companions relatively well. They weren't super nice and cuddly and friendly, mind you, but they were kinda like the Ultramarines in that regard. They had a job to do, and they had to get the job done, but other than that, they were relatively okay to be around. Not super nice, but not super assholes either. It was only after they met with their father that they started to get bitter, because Perturabo did not give them any shred of love. In fact, he gave them hate and bitterness. He essentially poisoned his sons. Not intentionally, mind you. It's just that he himself went through a lot of shit. And ultimately, we culminate this at the end of the heresy, where he realizes that everything he's been doing, all the mistakes that he's made, from there he then fucks off into the warp, and hopefully, when we see him again, he'll be a matured Perturabo, who understands what he did wrong, and maybe treat his sons a little bit better. Kinda like a matured version of the Lion, but we don't know in that regard. You see, people think that the Iron Warriors are evil, but they're not evil, per se. And whenever you talk about the Iron Warriors being terrible, people will often point to Honshu and his terrible machinations. For those of you who don't know, Honshu created the Demon Kalaba. The Demon Kalaba is one of the worst things that 40k has ever created, and for the love of God, do not Google the images of it. It is god-awful and terrible. I made that mistake once, and I still regret it till this day. But what you need to understand is that Honshu is an outcast amongst the Iron Warriors. They hate him. They think that he's weak. They call him a half-breed because he has half Iron Warrior gene seed and half gene seed from another chapter. He has even more of a massive chip on his shoulder than most Iron Warriors. Most Iron Warriors are flawed, at least traitor Iron Warriors. and most Iron Warriors in 40k are indeed traitor Iron Warriors. They became, like their father, incredibly bitter, a massive chip on their shoulder, and refusing to acknowledge any of their own faults. They believe that strength is ignoring weakness. But strength is not ignoring weakness, strength is acting in spite of weakness. To truly have strength, you must acknowledge your weakness and build up around it. But if you just ignore your weakness, you'll never truly be strong, you will only have a false sense of security. But the Iron Warriors weren't always like that. We see that Iron Warriors who have true strength, again like Barbius Dantiok, they understood that their lives are in their hands. They were not beholden to their father. It's quite a classic story, really. Your father does not care for you, but your father only has power over you if you give him. If you ignore him, if you don't care what he thinks about you, then he has no power over you. And that is what Dantiok did. Dantiok told Perturabo when he was wrong, and because of that he was shunned, and instead of taking it to heart, instead of becoming bitter, instead of becoming sad, he knew that his father was wrong, so he didn't give a fuck. He just did what he had to do, his father be damned. And that is truly what all Iron Warriors wanted to be. An Iron Warrior is efficient, but they're not evil. What you need to understand is that an Iron Warrior will treat their human population relatively well, but that's the thing. There are some Iron Warriors which treat populace cruel, but that's because they're weak. A true Iron Warrior, as what they were supposed to be, what Perturabo wanted them to be, and what Dantiok was, is that they will treat their populace well, but not out of a sense of they want them to be happy, but of a pragmatic sense of, if I do not give them a reason to want to overthrow me, they will not overthrow me. The Iron Warriors are not evil, they are pragmatic. But the most Iron Warriors that we see in modern day 40k are not true Iron Warriors. They are facades, they are weaklings, and they ignore their strength. They took their father's lessons to heart, but Perturabo's lessons were pretty shit. And ultimately, that is what people get wrong with the Iron Warriors. They're not supposed to be evil. There are a lot of Iron Warriors like Honsu that you could consider evil, but they're not what Iron Warriors are supposed to be. Not what they're supposed to represent in any capacity. And the Iron Warriors typically suffer from the traditional Chaos flop, that being that instead of giving any nuance, you just make them evil bad guys because it's easier to hate. I made a whole video talking about the problem with Chaos. But that begs the question, if modern day Iron Warriors are not what Iron Warriors were supposed to be, then what should an Iron Warrior actually be like? I gave the example of Barbius Dantiok, but I want to expand upon that, make a bit more of a broad scale. The Iron Warriors were always the thankless legion. They were the attritional legion. Anyone who's ever done any research into attritional warfare knows that it is not glorious. It is slow, it is terrible, and it is thankless work. Sieges are one of the worst things an army can do, because not only do you have to contend with the forces inside the castle or fortress, there is disease, weather, combat conditions, everything in between. It is terrible, it is thankless, and it is soul draining. To sit in a muddy trench, day after day, for months if not years at a time, to slowly starve out an enemy. Not only does it sap your resources, but it saps your morale. That's why sieges were often avoided. Not only do they cost a lot of time, effort, and energy, but they also cost a lot of manpower, both physically and mentally. So when you have a legion whose whole purpose is dedicated to siege warfare, they have to be built very tough. Hence they have to be like iron. And the old Iron Warriors before they met Perturabo, the Corpse Grinders, were just that. They did their thankless work quietly. They didn't want any praise, but the thing that changed them is when Perturabo was introduced. If Perturabo didn't give them any praise, they would have continued the way that they were, and they would have been an objectively better legion. But Perturabo did the opposite. He criticized them heavily. His sons were never enough for him. He hated them, and he made it very clear that he hated them. Imagine meeting your father, your long-awaited gene-sire. You hear about stories of the Salamanders or the Blood Angels or the Ultramarines, these amazing tales, and the first thing your dad tells you is that you need to beat to death one guy in your squad because you have failed as a son. That is your first introduction to your father, and it only gets worse from there. Your father does not care for your lives. Your father throws away your lives. We have several accounts throughout the Great Crusade where Perturabo was in a situation and he threw his men at a problem. He had no regard for his sons' lives. None at all. He was willing to spend them like cheap coin. And he made it known to his sons. And Perturabo, in his arrogance, in his failings as a father, simply said, "Oh, okay, if you feel anything else other than acceptance, you're weak, you're not iron. You should not feel anything. It's the definition of a toxic relationship. You are the problem, not me. And because of that, the true iron of the Legion was sapped away. Instead, you get people who were bitter, who hid their bitterness, who hid their weakness, who pretended. They convinced themselves that they were actually okay with this. And because of that, you didn't actually get iron. For iron to be strong, it must be tempered, it must be forged. But if you're so afraid of being hurt, of showing your father weakness, you will never truly forge your iron. Because you will never put yourself in a situation that has a chance of you failing or being hurt. Because you don't want dad to yell at you. As we see throughout the heresy, the loyalist elements of the Iron Warriors had two things in common. One, they were ostracized by their Primarch. Their Primarch did not like them, they were not part of his inner circle. And two, they did not like their Primarch in return. They saw through Perturabo's facade. They saw that he was weak. They saw that he was making his own mistakes. They saw that he was just projecting himself onto his sons. They saw that he was not truly Iron. So, why bother? They rejected him outright, and they committed to the true notice of Iron, that being finding your faults and expunging them. And that is ultimately what it meant to be an Iron Warrior. The modern day Iron Warriors are not that. They are fake copies of that. A true Iron Warrior is someone who understands their faults and accepts them. They're not nice, they're not friendly, don't get me wrong. If you write an Iron Warrior like a Salamander or an Ultramarine, you're doing it wrong. An Iron Warrior is not cruel, but he's not kind. He is neutral. He is Iron. Iron is neutral. Iron is a tool. A true Iron Warrior will make sure that his servants are fed, clothed, and sheltered. But that's it. He's not going to sit and spend time with them. He's not going to find out about their family. He's not going to do small talk. But at the same time, he's not going to take them and turn them into some fucked up reproductive cycle to create more Space Marines. And that sums it up perfectly what people get wrong about the Iron Warriors. They're not meant to be evil. If you see a evil Iron Warrior, then they're not a true Iron Warrior. Iron Warriors are meant to be iron, neutral, cold, steely, and there are very few Iron Warriors truly left. The loyalist Iron Warriors have been changed into something else altogether. The traitor Iron Warriors are usually just fake Iron Warriors, pretending that they have true strength to hide their weakness. Again, they're another example of a legion being lost essentially, but this time it was a direct implementation of their Primarch. Perturabo changed his legion, and he changed them for the worse. If Perturabo treated his sons better, not saying that he loved them and cared for them like a Vulcan or a Sanguinius, mind you, but he didn't beat them to death the first time he saw them, they would have still been Iron Warriors. But now what we got now are just fake Iron Warriors. They're not truly Iron, they're just warriors. But there is some hope for the Iron Fourth. Perturabo is yet to come back. We don't know what GW is going to do with him. If Perturabo does return, and I would like to see him return, I'd like to see him return as a mature Perturabo. Someone better, someone different, someone who understands what true strength is. Again, do not make any Iron Warrior happy. Do not make them content, do not make them smiley, do not make them friendly. They're not supposed to be friendly. They're also not supposed to be cartoonishly evil. They're supposed to be competent. They're supposed to be an antagonist, not a villain. And if Perturabo does come back, there's a good chance we may see that in the Iron Warriors. It's unlikely, but it's a possibility. But I talk about more about that in my other video. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much for watching. I know this one is pretty short, but I talked a lot about what I wanted to talk about with that other video. Again, this is kind of like a companion piece, but this is just to stress that one point of what people get wrong about the Iron Warriors. They're not evil. They're not friendly, but they're not evil. So if you want even more context, watch that video I did a few times ago about why the Iron Warriors are the best legion. It goes into more detail, into more theory crafting, and like I said, it's a companion piece to this, so watch both of them together. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and an even bigger thank you to my channel members. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Majora of the Void. Big shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. RB20 Guy, and Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart. And big shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SPW, and Mr. Michael Hayeda. Thank you guys also very much for watching. It does mean the world to me from the very bottom of my heart. Join the memberships. You get access to some awesome benefits, exclusive roles and servers on the Discord. You can access these videos a full day early usually, but while we're doing Brad's Christmas special, that's not gonna happen. Sorry about that. You get access to some behind the scenes stuff so you guys get a hand in help making these videos and the production schedule, and you get a big old kiss from yours truly, yes I will. But remember, whether you guys pay for this or not, this will always be free, and I will love you all the same. Yes, I will. Mwah. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. May stay strong out there, boys and gals, and I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. So I've seen a few people complain, oh, he just repeats the same thing over and over for 20 minutes. It's called reinforcing a point, because me talking about something for 20 minutes does not equate to you seeing 700 memes about why Vulcan is a child murderer.